Talk talk? Yeah, that seems to be a thing. Sorry, Victoria. I am. I'm the worst. I got it. I got it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that, Victoria. Okay, so jQuery is basically we have the jQuery function. And the idea behind this is that we are able to like call it like a normal function here, right? Let me do a clear. So I can do something that's like, well, let me take a look at my DOM. I have a header and a div and a form and a button whose name is add. So what I can do is I can search within my console here. If I were doing a CSS rule for how this button should behave, I might add something that was like, hey, button. And I might say that it's font weight bold. And that would change indeed the font weight for that button, right? Right, and it's affected by that thing. I might also add a class, but for right now, button suffices. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, I want to grab that, and I'm going to pass in exactly what my CSS selector would be, button. And that gives me a jQuery result, right? I've made a query in JavaScript, so that's why it's called jQuery. Query, query, yeah, French, I guess. So what makes sense here is to sort of add this to something. So I'm going to say var button. Now that dollar, I don't have to do that, but this is a sort of convention I've picked up that's been very helpful. If I have something that is a jQuery, if I'm using jQuery, and if something is a jQuery result, I'm going to put a dollar in front of it to remind myself, because we don't have type checking in frickin' JavaScript. So I'm going to say this, var $button equals button, and I can say things like button dot, well, I can do button dot length to find out how many things I grabbed, which there's one. I can do button at 0 to grab that first thing, which is this button, right? But that the selecting itself isn't the only cool part about this. It's also that jQuery has this like, jQuery is like the Iron Man suit around the DOM node itself is like Tony Stark, right? Tony Stark is nice on his own, but it's really wrapping it in the suits that makes him Iron Man. He would argue that he is Iron Man, and the suit's just an extension of his Iron Man-ness, but that's another story entirely. So I can do things like add class red, right? And let's just say now when I go to the console, I go to elements, this button now has the class red attached to it. And if I said, hey, button.red color tomato, that is a thing. And I can go back here and say button.remove class red, and it will remove it. I can also say button.toggle class red. I can also say var go crazy equals set interval function button.toggle class red 100 milliseconds. It's a browser rave. All right, clear interval. Go crazy. Okay, so I'm able to toggle that class, which is to turn it off and on. So I can do things that actually affect this DOM node somehow. And what does that include? Ermagerd, you guys. It includes lots of stuff. It includes lots of stuff. So I'm going to go to the jQuery documentation here. jQuery docs. jQuery API documentation. Can anyone tell me what the word API, or the acronym API means? application programming interface. This is going to be very important tomorrow, this term API. Just letting you know. It's going to be a big deal. All right, so we can do things like we can move this around, we can append new things, we can change its text, we can, yeah, so I can say, button.text. If I just say button.text, it's going to give me what the text is. If I say button.text and add some string here, add me, you sassy what's it, then that can alter the text to something very silly. Yeah. We can do dot on, which listens to events, so we can add event handlers or take off event handlers. We can do everything that we did before. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start making the stuff. So one thing I'm going to do is everything I'm going to do, I want it to happen after the DOM is loaded. I want to do it after it's ready. So a really common pattern is to, if you put this in the dollar function, this is the same as saying, in fact, I'm going to say function on DOM ready here. Everything's going to happen. I can say dollar on DOM ready. I can also say document.ready on DOM ready. If that makes you feel like, oh, I know what that's doing and not what that is doing, that's fine too. Okay, so on DOM ready. Let's figure out what we're going to do here. So here's my jQuery page. I want to reload this. So I have, if we look at the elements, I have an input, a button, and a UL here. And what I want to do is when somebody writes something in the input and adds it, I want to add it onto this. So let me, what items am I going to want to, I'm going to want to grab some of these items so that I can actually like manipulate them somehow. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say var input equals input, var button equals button, and var list equals UL. And if I just console.log these, that's fine, right? So let's make sure that we actually have them. Console. Yeah, the first one is that button, or that input. Second one is that button. There it is. And the third one is the UL. So we have our elements that we want to do stuff with. Now what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of functionality, which is that whenever I write something here and try to press add, it will, well, basically I want it to, I'm going to function here that says function add to do. And I guess what I want to say here is if I want to be able to at least get the input, or maybe I just want to see if I can get this to trigger, right? So my first step is going to be, let's get this to trigger. Console.log I happened. I matter. Right? Some days you're going to have to like look at yourself and be like, I happened. I matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this button.on. That's how I add something. I'm going to say what the event's going to be. In this case, it's going to be click. And I'm going to add this function to handle things. Now, here's what I do whenever I have a situation where I'm passing a callback and I have no idea how it's going to be called, right? Guess what callbacks are, right? You're just passing off a function hoping that someone does something with them, right? It's a little like a ransom thing where you pass in the money and then you hope that you get back your very valuable marmot. That's right. I went to a pet place, not a other ransomy thing place. Okay. So what I always like to do is I like to say console.log this, console.log arguments. That tells me how this function is being used. So let's reload this. I'm going to take up that console log too. Let's reload this. And what I have is, well, it's doing some other wacky stuff. Let me just try to go to my sources. Whenever this happens, okay, that's too much. It's too much. I'm going to go to JS, app.js here, and I'm just going to put a breakpoint here. This will let me stop my function and just get to that stop. So here we are. Okay, this is a button, and arguments is an event. All right. Now I don't want it to do this. I think it's causing the form to submit, which is why I have this and content equals add up here. And content equals and add equals. I think it's confused there. So I know that I'm getting an event in here, and I think it's becoming a form event. So what I'm going to say is event.prevent default. So we're going to try this again. I'm going to take off that breakpoint. Okay, cool. So now my page isn't rendering, reloading. All right. So this is my one piece I'm going to give here, which is event handlers. So whenever I have an event handler and I want to see what it actually does, I just kind of call element.on event name, right? And then console.log this, console.log arguments. And this lets me know what I'm getting, right? Really handy. There's a different, like when you use arrow functions, it's not going to work quite this way because it doesn't use this and it doesn't use arguments. You'd have to do, so the arrow function version of this would be, like if you were passing an arrow function, would be, well, no console log this, but you could use the spread operator to get all the params here, and then console.log args. Or even args. If you wanted to, that spreads it out so it's like a arrow function version. Cool, cool, cool. So I want to, now I had this add to do up above. I kind of want this add to do function to have the logic of adding a to do. And if I was to add a to do, what's one thing I would need to make that happen? I'm going to add something to my to-do list. What's one thing I'm going to need here? Yeah, the thing to add, the actual like text. The only thing it really has is text, so I know I'm going to do that. So I know so I kind of separate out my things like this just so I have some sort of sense of what I'm doing. And also if I find myself later being like, what happened? This gives me a good sense. I don't really need the event this time, but I'm going to say add to do. And where's that text going to come from, though? The input, that's right. So what I'm going to say is $input. And, well, if this were a normal thing, I would say .value, right? But jQuery is going to have something else. So I'm going to say jQuery input value. And it's going to say, oh, there it is, .val. .val value, .val function. All right, so .val. And I call it without anything. All right, Cool, cool, cool. Console log, I happened, I matter, and I'm going to throw the text in here. So I'm going to say ASDF add, oh, I have to reload this, I think. ASDF add, I happened, I matter. Also, totally forgot, event.prevent default. So there's two things I'm going to do here. One is that I am going to pass the input val to add to do, and I'm also going to say input.val. I want to clear this, so I want to give it an empty string. Come on. All right, ASDF add. Now it says I happened, I matter, ASDF, but now this is cleared, which is the behavior, which is half the behavior I wanted, right? So technically speaking, this button's work is done. I'm cool with that. Now I gotta do something here, which is that I want to add, I want to create an LI, and I want to add it to my list, my dollar list here. And there's a couple of ways for me to do this. The first I can do is I can say list. So I guess if I were doing this in client, in like vanilla JavaScript, I would have to create an li node, document.createElement li. I would have to then append it. I would have to change its text field, its inner text, I think, right? Inner text to be whatever the text was here. And then I would have to append that li node to my ul node, as you well know. So what I'm going to do is I can kind of do that in, like, there's a few ways for me to write that in jQuery. And I'm going to use what's called the chaining syntax. And what this means is that when I make changes to something, what it's going to return is the same thing I had before a moment ago. So I can pass this. Now this isn't a CSS selector, is it? It's an actual node. So what this does is this creates an li node. And then I can say .text. I don't know why it says it's a promise, but that's another thing. And I'm going to pass it the text, right? If we look at the jQuery API here and we look for text, what we're going to see is a function here that says text, 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 text. If I say text nothing, it returns string. But if I say text, text, it returns the jQuery. It returns the item. So text dot text text is, then I can, the next thing I can do is I want to add it to that UL. I want to append it. Well, there are two things I can do. One is append and one is append to. It's the same operation, but you look at it from different sides. So in this case, I could say const var, right? Var li equals li.text, right? And I could say var, I could say ul.append li. This is acceptable. I could also write ul.append li. I can just put the text in right here, plus text. Come on, li. And that's going to take this, turn it into, it's going to take the HTML string, turn it into a jQuery thing, which is going to actually just become what it's going to need to be, and then append that. And let's actually take a look at this. So, write jQuery. .ul is not defined. You're right. List. List. Save that. Reload. And now it's added. right? Is that well? It's acting like an order. It doesn't matter. Okay. The third way I can write this, and this is the way that I would prefer, is just to say three ways of writing. One. All that. Two. List out append, all that stuff. That's another way I could write it. And then the third way, which is my preference, just for no reason other than that it's my preference and I think that it's cleaner, is this. I'm going to write dollar li dot text dot append to list. And what it's going to do now is, and look to see if you can see the difference in behavior. Did anyone notice any difference in the behavior? That's right, there's no difference in the behavior. I'm a jerk. So it's going to behave the same way, and I think one of the cool things about it is that there's different ways to write the same thing, so that you're not twisting your code to fit something else. And this is a lot better than saying, oh, there was going to be a bunch of stuff. Now, I'm going to add one more feature here. Also, I probably need to plug in, but that's another story entirely. I'm going to add one more feature here that I was not given by Carl. Not that he had to. Like, he's just good people. I like him. I like that Carl. I like that snowboard Jesus. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a button. This is going to be more of an A tag. And do I want to make it an A tag? I think I want to make it a button. Button. And I'm going to add, I'm going to say that this is class equals, nope. Yeah. You know, I'm going to make this up here. So, yeah, I'm going to say var li, or var item, I guess, equals this. And I'm going to say item button times button. Oh, at times dot append to item. Right, and there's that button. I'm not sure if you can see it. It's real subtle. And what I'm going to add here is append to item. I'm going to add a class of deleter. Sorry, add class. My bad. My bad, class. All right, now what I want to be able to do, as you might have guessed by now, is I want to click this and have it cause that to delete off. Now, how am I going to do this? Clearly, the answer is dark magics. This is actually, I could add an event listener here. Right here, I could add an event listener on click. But that's going to cause me to, there's a reason not to do that that's kind of complicated, and that's basically once it's gone away, it won't clean up its listener. And then I'll still have that thing. I'll still have that listener. If I make a bunch of these, and if I'm making a bunch of these quickly over time, I can find myself with a lot of kind of loose ends in my code. So I've done this button.onClick do all this stuff, and I'm going to add one here as well. And I'm going to say list. Oh, by the way, yeah, I might even just say all this stuff goes here, right? And that still works. Just take it boo. Button is this button, but I'm going to add all my stuff that I want to add to it right here. And I'm going to do another one right here, and it's going to say on click. But I can also put in a selector if I want to. So I don't want this just to be a click handle that happens for the UL. I want it to be for something of the deleter class. All right? So I'm going to create this. I'm going to take a look at the event. And I am going to console.log this. Right? Not on this one, because this one isn't actually in a form. The other one was in a form, which is why I was making it do a thing. Yeah, it's a whole different thing. All right, so call mom. Also, I should probably call my mom. That's in the story entirely. All right, so this is the deleter. And what's nice about this is I have this one function that I've added, and I don't have to clean it up afterwards. It's just hanging out in this UL, and that's all good. So I have this deleter, and what I'm going to say is console.log this. Now this is the element itself. So sometimes if I want to do more like jQuery stuff, I end up writing this. Var $this equals $this. It drives me crazy saying the word this as many times as I do. And also, by the way, you got to be really careful about what your this is, because your this can, if you use a callback or like an event callback with a function, the this is going to refer to the thing that triggered that actual action. So var $this equals $this. And then what I want to find is this li, and I want to delete it. Now, because the li just happens to be the parent, I can say var li equals this dot parent. Dad? Parent. Yes. So I can get that one parent, or I can go and I can filter it by a selector. Yeah, is that parent? And now I can do something to actually remove this. I can say li dot remove. Let's see how this looks. All right, now let's see that again with the elements at play. Called dad. Here I have a div with ul and li called dad deleter. And now the ul is exactly where it was. And this is just one I kind of just threw on there, which is, you know, fine. So now that I've created that, I'm able to perform all the things I want to do, which I think is pretty handy. So to cover, I guess we still have 22 minutes left. I already went through all of Carl's stuff. So what I want to cover is that, now that we've seen an example, is there are 4 things that you can put into the jQuery function. And we actually do all 4 of them in this example here. Yes, we do, don't we? Yes, we do. So 4 things you can put into the jQuery function. The first is a function. So if I put a function into the jQuery function, that function that you insert, so I should say this is a callback function, right? That callback will execute once the DOM is ready. If the DOM is already ready when you call it with a callback, the callback will execute immediately. That was a really confusing sentence. So basically, it's like if the DOM's already loaded and it's been loaded for however much amount of time, if I say, hey, jQuery with this function, it'll happen immediately. Hey, everything's loaded. Yeah, you're good. So it kind of like, it'll hold on to it until everything's good, but you know, it might just go right now and we're all good then. So the second thing is a selector string, or kind of like a CSS selector string, you know? And you can put anything you'd put in a CSS selector string in there. That will find all elements that match it. If you put in a CSS selector, you can also provide a DOM element or jQuery result as the second parameter to narrow your search. So if you're looking for anything with class deleter, for instance, I might be able to put in, I'm going to put in that li as the second thing, so you know, I know exactly which deleter it's going to be. I'm going to help narrow my search down to just this thing I provided second. The third thing you could do is an HTML tag, like complete with symbols. Let's go penguin. Everyone else see a penguin? Like its beak is looking at you, and then there's its eyes, and it's all right, cool. That will create a new DOM element of that type, which you can then append to something. And the third thing is a DOM element. Should I space that out? I feel like I should space that out. And what happens if you pass in a DOM element is this wraps that DOM element with the jQuery utilities. Now, I said that jQuery is, like when you do that dollar function, it actually performs a query, and I'm even calling this a result. Well, what's one thing you know to be true about queries? And results. Well, it can turn multiple things, but also it's kind of costly. Like if you were like, hey, I got to look up that thing, and then someone's like, hey, what was that thing? And you're like, I got to look it up again, right? You might want to write it down just so you remember. And this is a similar issue where it's easy to create stuff and then forget about it. So right here, I could have easily said append to .ul, or sorry, append to ul, and would have found that unordered list and go. But it would have had to like do the search for it again. Now this is a tiny little page, no one cares. But generally speaking, once you have that search, you don't want to have to do it again, which is why I do all this stuff at the beginning. Because here's my list, and I'm able to say like, okay, I search for the input once, the button once, and the list once. The stuff that was on the page when I started and is not going away. I did all of those searches first. That was the first thing. I wonder how close my code is to his. I feel like it's not that close. Event.target. He used event.target instead of this, which is also cool. button siblings input. Oh, he went the long way around, which is fine. But yeah, what I do is I kind of like everything that I'm going to be targeting, I get first. The item, sorry, no, the input, the button, the list, and then I have them available as we are going. Are there any questions? Yeah. Right. Right. Yes, I did that on purpose. I really wish I was using constant lat and arrow functions, but it's yeah. So the thing is that there is spotty support for ES6 and all ES6y things, as well as ES7, ES8, ES Next stuff, and so when I am writing client code that will just go onto the browsers, I tend to use still ES5, and we all kind of encourage you to still use ES5 for browser code. Now, there is a tool that you will find out about in a few weeks called Babel, and that can translate your funky ES6 into ES5, and it's all cool. You don't have that tool yet. So for right now, when you're doing front-end code, you'll be writing ES5, and when you're doing back-end code, you'll be ES6. And that way your code will work on, even all the way back to Internet Explorer. Yeah, I said Exploder. That was on purpose. Okay, well, those are the 4 things you can put into a jQuery. We talked about appending, removing, moving around, toggling classes. Yeah. Wow, I feel like extend it to an object, parse HTML. There's a map, it's parse HTML. Yeah, it has some promise stuff, which is hilarious. Has class, mouse leave, context, mouse move, mouse up. So let's look at some events, actually, would be a good idea, I think. So there are, attach a handler to an event for the elements, blur, change. There are, for a lot of the more important events, the most common ones, there is a specific alias. So the .click is it can be like an alias for .onClick. Now, I don't use .click very often when I'm doing jQuery, and the reason is that if you forget to actually put something in there, what happens is it activates the click. Like it finds that button and it clicks it, which may not be what you wanted, right? But yeah, click, key up, so browser events, form events, keyboard events. So let's look at the form events. Blur, change, focus, focus in, focus out, select, submit. Submit is what triggers, like you can trigger a form submit using this. You can listen to the submit event. And focus and blur, I want to bring your attention to. Focus means that an element is now, like if you typed, you'd be typing in that input element. That is what focus means, is that it has the focus. So when it gets the focus, there's going to be a focus event. When it loses the focus, well, what's the opposite of focus? Blur. Because I still think that's stupid. But, yeah. But I don't have the time to focus on it. So let's form events, keyboard events, key down, key press, key up. There is a change event for inputs, but you'll probably, as your inputs are changing, you'll probably be using the key press or key up or key down just to make sure certain things are happening. Oh, that reminds me, key up, I don't have. On this, I have ASDF. Oh, never mind, it does press enter. Okay, I guess I caught that. Yeah, I guess that triggers the same thing as the button. Yeah, key press, key up. And then mouse events. There's a bunch of these. And you might take it on yourself to figure out what each of them does. There's mouse move, mouse leave, mouse enter. mouse down, which is actually the click. There's click, which is an up and down click. Double click, hover, which means your mouse is over something, has started going over something. Mouse out, mouse over, mouse up, and toggle. Yeah. Bind two or more handlers to the matched elements to be executed in alternate clicks, which is pretty clever. Yeah, mouse move, mouse leave, mouse enter. There is a difference between mouse enter and mouse over. They give an example. Yeah. Anyway, are there any questions? Things that you're likely to change. There is an animation library. You can make things fade in. Fade in, fade out. For instance, if we go here, if we say item.append to list dot fade in, I think they want us to do a fade in with a duration. Let's do 500 milliseconds. Reload this. Hi. Oh, it didn't do it. Let's do dot hide. Hide and show is a common one too. Dot fade in 400. Here we go. See that? I'll slow it down. I now have a big giant head. All right. Now when I say, hey. Ooh. So that comes standard in jQuery. Then I might do something that's like, you could fade in. You could also say, with the fade out, you have a complete function. So here I'm also going to say, on click deleter, this li as this dot parent, and then I'm going to say li dot fade out over 500, and then function li dot remove. So now, hey, and it fades out. Let's make that again. So 2000. I'm sorry, Taylor, there's my big giant head in the way. It's okay, you can say it's a big giant head. I know it. I can't really buy hats. It's cool. Hey. To do today, apologize for my head size. There it is. I'm sorry. That is done now. It's gone. Okay. Well, I'm trying to think of other stuff. Like we've done kind of all the stuff we'd want to do with jQuery. We've seen the same application with smaller application code. Now, mind you, jQuery itself is a big old boondoggle of a lot of script. I really find that it's a great way of doing, it's a great way of doing like small bits of application code. And there's some things you're going to find where it's like, well, we have jQuery on the page anyway. And you're like, you have jQuery on the page? Why do you? Okay, it's there. Well, guess let's use it. Rails tends to include it already. Yeah. And this is a great way of figuring out at least what you want to do in terms of what you want to do in terms of what I'm trying to say. Like how you would plan around altering DOM if you were to write it in vanilla JavaScript. The hard part about vanilla JavaScript is that it can kind of change from browser to browser. For the most part, it's standardized, but it's not always. So with jQuery, at least you know it'll be cool cross-browser. Okay, well, I think that's all I have. If there's no more questions, are there any questions? I think the only next thing I would say is that there's such thing as jQuery plugins. And you can, like here's 19 brilliant jQuery plugins. Like Timeline.js and Tilted Page Scroll. Let me see, here's a full screen demo. Not sure what it's doing. Let's try Dolphin. Try resizing the window. So when I resize the window, it kind of moves things. Watch how the frames change to use all the available space. Well, I guess that's the thing it's doing. Kind of moving the image around so it takes the right amount of perspective. That makes sense. So yeah, anything you want to do, there's probably a good jQuery plugin for it. Focus points, SVG magic, face detection. I'm not sure I want to do that. Round slider. Fair enough. And it's really easy to write jQuery plugins yourself, if you find yourself so inclined. All you're really doing is just writing something that's going to be part of the jQuery thing. So let's try fn.tomato equals function. And I'm just going to say it's going to be called on this, which is going to be a jQuery thing, and I'm just going to say, hey, this dot style or this dot CSS. Or this dot. Right? And what I can do is I can just find, so now that I've declared this down here, I can also say of that deleter dot tomato. And indeed, it causes my button to disappear. Oh, and I have to, return this .css. And there it is with my big tomato change. So it's just a way that I can wrap up a bunch of DOM manipulation into a function and then call it on it, and it's part of, like that $.fn is where all of those functions live. It's the prototype. So if you wanted to see like all of the things you could do, it's just do $.fn, and you will see everything. Add back, add class after, Ajax complete, Ajax error, Ajax end, Ajax start, Ajax stop, Ajax success, animate, and pen to pen to, adder, before bind, blur, change children, clear queue, click, clone, closest constructor, contents, context menu, CSS, data, double click, delay, delegate, dequeue, detached, each empty end, ec, extend, fade in, fade out, fade to, fade toggle, filter, find, finish. First, focus, focus in, focus out, get, has class. Hide, I'm just going to read these for the rest of the time. Hide, hover, HTML, index init, init. Inner height, inner width, insert after, insert before is jQuery 3.1. Key down, key press, key up, last, length, load, map, mouse down, mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse move, mouse out, mouse over, mouse up, next, next all, next until not. offset parent, on, one, outer height, outer width, parents until, position, prepend to. Oh, by the way, okay, so append is to add something to the end of the list, prepend is to add it to the beginning. I guess that was also important. Move class, scroll. Scroll will listen to like the scroll action. It's good. Okay, I'm going to stop saying things. You guys know what's up. Yeah, and that takes us to 5. Okay, so yeah, jQuery is just a great way of kind of writing the stuff you would write in vanilla.js. It's like it's a thin wrapper around just the vanilla.js behaviors. It's a little more forgiving. It's a little more cross-browser, well documented. And it will be what you'll be using for DOM manipulation this week and next week, but not in 2 weeks after that. Cool, cool. All right, I'll get these notes out to you. Thank you guys for being patient.